Okay, it is 7 o'clock. Going to call the meeting to order. I want to make a statement here first, please. If you have your cell phone with you, please make sure it's on silent or shut it off, so that way we're not interrupting. One of the things I'm going to do when you get your turn to talk, what I need you to do is to come over here by the card table and stand. There's a mic there on the table, so that way it will pick you up. Okay. Last thing, please be respectful of everyone in the building, so, you know, no cursing, anything like that. If it gets out of hand, I may stop the individual and ask them to leave. So, that being said, we'll take roll. Kyle? Yes. Kevin? Lee? Yeah. Craig? Yep. Steve? Yep. Motion to approve the agenda. Craig, do I have a second? Kyle? We'll take roll. Kyle? Lee? Yeah. Craig? Yep. And Steve? Yep. Okay, visitors we have is Doug Herman. I'll get to in a moment. Consent agenda. Minutes of the last meeting, budgets, clerk report. There's also liquor license that's in there too. Yes. Which got put in there last moment, so. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Lee, do I have a second? Steve? We'll take roll. Kyle? Yep. Lee? Yeah. Craig? Yep. And Steve? Yep. Okay. So at this time, I'm going to open the public meeting discussing nuisance properties and abatements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to the floor. So at one at a time, if you would like to come up and make a comment, like I said, please come over to the table and stand there so that way the mic can hear. There's a lot of people that have been watching what's going on, and that's one of the things that we're getting is that nobody can hear what the audience is saying. So Doug is here to answer any questions. We also have Mark and Steve from ECOG that are doing the inspections here, so the floor is open. Who wants to be first? Just do me the favor and please state who you are when you get up there so we know.
So right here?
Yeah, you can stand on right there beside it, yeah.
All right. I'm James Kopp. I own 304 East Webster Street. Property there. I've gotten several letters from you guys stating I have nuisance. I cleaned up the property the best I could. I have vehicles that haven't been registered, or the vehicles that aren't up to date. Yesterday I went to the courthouse and tried to register all my stuff and get it up to date. Right now my license is suspended and until February 1st. And so they wouldn't let me do that. But on February 1st I can have everything brought up to date. So I'm asking for an extension until then on just the vehicle registrations, stuff like that.
Which address was that one again?
304 East Webster Street.
304 East Webster. I'm just looking for it quick, see if it was here. I see that one.
It's probably over on the table there. I didn't make a copy of every single one of them.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Do we know what that one was? You said vehicles?
Yeah, Doug did send a final letter on that one, and I think you've been getting letters for almost a year.
Yeah, I've been getting letters.
Yeah.
I usually clean it up and then it's like a new vehicle might pop, like, you know, I got a buddy living with me, he's got a vehicle there and then he's registered. I'm having all the vehicles, as many I can put in my garage. I got 2 stall garage, so I can put 2 of them in there. But after that, like they won't let me re-up the tags or nothing. And
James,
the big truck.
How many vehicles did you have that needed to be licensed?
I think 2. Otherwise, they're all licensed. They're just not. The tags are expired on them. And so.
If he can't, he's got to wait till February 1st to get his license to do it. That's technicality of the law.
It's up to you guys. What do you want to do?
Mr. Kopp, in addition to registering and licensing, are they all, if they were registered, are they all operable? Can you fire them up? No broken windows, no flat tires, none of that?
Well, there's a flat tire on my Avenger and that, and, the windshield's, broken, but it runs, drives.
You know, I'll just throw my 2 cents in, or Mark and Steve can too, under your city code, under junk vehicles, registered and licensed, operable, not a junk vehicle, and there's a lot of lists that goes under that, so if it's got a broken window, a flat tire, a missing tire, a missing door, a missing hood, all of those things could make it a junk vehicle. So I don't remember what these looked like, so just asking, even if they got registered, they may still be a problem under your city code.
We could say, looking at the photos, it looks like the main thing is that they're expired tags. There was a picture of tires laying there.
I got those cleaned up.
Okay.
Those are all cleaned up.
So as what it looks like the majority is expired tags on vehicles.
Yeah, my opinion is he's making an effort to clean things up anyway. He's trying to do, he went to the courthouse and tried to get his registration. I said, let's give him an extension.
I agree.
Okay, I guess the only thing I don't know, can we vote on stuff like this, Doug? Or how do we?
It's not really on
This
your
is a little-
agenda,
yeah, this
it's not
is a
on your
little
agenda to
different.
take action.
Okay.
So you're not gonna
That's
take
right.
action
Why
tonight to
anybody
do
come here if
anything
it's not gonna
negative,
be voted
but
on?
I think at your next meeting, you can put this on your agenda to officially give them an extension.
Okay.
So it's fine to discuss it, see, you know, you've got a public notice meeting, you can discuss it and kind of reach a consensus,
Okay.
but the official action will have to happen in another meeting.
Okay, let me ask you this, if I might. I don't, never met you, so I don't know if I'm even talking to the right person here, so.
Our city attorney.
Yeah, I've never met him before. I think that's good.
It's not bad.
But, do we need to have, we could say, oh yeah, we'll give you the extension, but do we need to have some sort of paperwork in line to, saying that, okay, you're getting your stuff done in February, but by February 30th, it has to be completed? Well, no, there's a 30 days in February, isn't there? But are we supposed to do things like that, or?
I wouldn't say there's a law that requires it, but I think to have a clear record, you'd have the city clerk's office send a letter saying, we've approved your extension, you have until this date to be in compliance.
So, he needs to give us a date, say, I'll have it done by this date.
I think that's best, to have a certain date, yep.
That sounds fine. March 1st. Be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was looking back at your agenda, there is an extension request on here, but it's for 105 East Main, not for this property. So that one you can take action, this one you can't
Okay.
until a future.
That was the only one that requested
Yep.
that we take action.
Okay, okay. All right, so if you guys, that's what you wanna do, Tammy's made note of that, so we'll get that on the next meeting.
So does James need to come up with a letter kind of officiating stating he needs an extension till March 1st then?
That's, we're supposed to have a letter to request the,
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send him a letter, correct?
I need to sign it?
well, he should actually send the letter first, asking for the extension.
Okay.
So that way it's in writing.
All right.
You can just, it can be a handwritten one, and you can drop it in the Dropbox if you can't come in during normal hours.
Perfect.
Just make sure we have it before, within a week,
December 12th, the meeting.
yeah.
Just
So we-
before the,
No problem. That it?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
How you doing?
Good.
My name's Nicholas. I own the property up 307 North Oak Street. There's been a lot that I've been trying to get done on that place since I've been there for 2 years now. Tore down a building, cleaned up the mess left by previous tenants and stuff. I started the roof. It's not gonna get done due to the cold weather and stuff, along with the siding, and I have windows on order. I have no idea when they're gonna be there. Those were the main complaints I think that were left on the original list. There might be some more, but basically I'm just asking for an extension because I am making progress on the property, and I'm going to continue making progress on the property. Just needing some more time.
Give them time, that's all we can do.
Again,
What are you asking for time?
Well, I mean, depending on the weather and stuff like that, with it getting cold and icy and stuff like that, the roof and probably most of the siding won't be started until spring again.
You understand why I'm asking that question, right? We have to have some sort of an
Right,
idea.
right, and I understand that, and I agree. I mean, if we have a mild winter, I might be able to get some of the siding done during the winter. I basically got steel on the ready, I just gotta wait for it to get dropped off. And the siding's gonna be steel as well, just cause I can get that on the cheap. It's the windows that are gonna cost, and they are costing. Probably about, I think, 13 windows in the house. So.
was that most of the,
That was the only thing left was.
Yeah, we noted that you were working on the roof last time, so we held off with the letter the last time.
Yeah.
That's as long as we have a time frame.
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna continue cleaning up whatever's left on the property itself and keeping it upkept while I'm at a different address. But, it's the windows that are gonna take the longest. That's the most expensive right now. So, like I said, if I have a mild winter, I can definitely keep going on the siding. Maybe not the roof, cause I really don't wanna be up there when it's frozen. But everything else, I mean, the siding I can get to probably, or start at least, make progress on it. The windows are definitely the most expensive part. That's what's gonna take the longest.
How do we do that? When he is making efforts, he is cleaning things up, but we know you can't do some of it till spring, so how do we do that when it comes from extension wise?
well, again, I would say he's gonna have to submit a letter asking for a reasonable, time.
What is our definition of reasonable? I don't even know that.
Well, end of April. Yeah, I mean, just think about when the weather usually turns, Lee. and-
We're in Iowa, dude.
I understand that. I totally understand.
Yeah, that's right. No, I just was just curious about all, that's why I'm asking the questions.
It's just our best judgment as far as,
So there's no set plan that says this or that? Okay, good.
no, but if the gentleman tells us that he's gonna have it done by April 1st, that's what he asked for the extension, that's what the council approves, then he has till April 1st.
And then he's gonna have to send a letter over to him again too, right?
Yes, he's
So
gonna,
then he can put it in the letter when he plans on having it
If
done.
we have a horrible winter or something occurs, there's no reason why you can't meet again and give an additional extension.
exactly.
And
And
there
I-
will
and
be
I think it's
progress made
important to
by
note-
then. Whether I meet the deadline or not and need another extension, there will be progress regardless.
So when Nick moved in there, I don't know if you guys are aware of it, he moved into a complete mess, and he really worked hard, you guys really
Do you remember
noticed
what it
that,
used to
to
look
clean it up,
like?
so,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So we do appreciate that,
Oh,
what you've done there,
I
so.
appreciate you guys giving me some time to, I mean, you guys have been patient. I know that property's looked real bad for a long time, so
Yeah.
I wanna get it cleaned up, so.
You can just put in your letter about when you think you're gonna have it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
gotta come up the next meeting anyhow, so.
Right, yep, I'll have it in within the next day or two. I'll have it in Dropbox.
Before Nick goes too far with siding, is there anything in your code that would prohibit any kind of siding? Sometimes it has to be of a residential character, or can he put barn siding up if he wants to do barn steel?
Tammy, do you know if there's anything about siding in our code as far as what we can use? I don't think there is.
I don't think so,
Okay.
as long as it doesn't have holes in it and, I mean, it's, yeah, I don't think there's anything
Okay.
concerning cause we do have one house that was approved that's like a house on the edge of town that's steel sided,
Okay.
so.
I just didn't want you to get started and then be told
Yeah.
halfway through, that's not acceptable.
I
Some cities do.
appreciate that,
Yeah.
Yep.
cause that would've been not fun.
Yep.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
I know. Deb Hyken, 616 East Main. We got rid of the weeds. The junk vehicle is not a junk vehicle. It's licensed, registered, drivable. And as far as anything else, I don't know what you guys want.
Yeah, we noted that vehicle was moved from the yard last time. We had some foundation issues on the one side of the house, and I think just I know siding and paint is expensive, but but just the lack of paint on the house was one thing that we've been citing.
You're worried that I'm not painting my house.
It's something that we cite.
Well, I kinda agree there, I mean, we can't just have to tell everybody you gotta paint your house.
And the foundation issue, that's not even visible from the road, so I don't know how anybody got that.
And there's 5 jacks underneath that, so the foundation ain't holding nothing up
Yeah.
anyway.
That's not going anywhere. It's no danger to anybody.
Yeah, you did clean up the yard in the last few visits. You had an appliance next to the garage, I think on the last visit.
That gas stove I smoke fish in, I'm not getting rid of that smoker. And that other piece there, I set around my grill when the wind's blowing so it don't blow the grill out. I'm not getting rid of that either.
Yeah, I know there's a couple other houses in town that had lack of paint issues, and that's kind of a
Gray area.
yeah.
They do nothing
in terms of
about that.
eyesore and
Paint
shade.
the house, when I increase my taxes, pay for that damn school now.
So what's left on this one then, according to, other than the paint?
Yep. You have the foundations in there,
Yeah, we didn't send a letter last time. Junk and junk vehicles, which I think was taken care of, like you mentioned, and then dangerous building, house siding, disrepair, tall weeds, which is an issue anymore. So I guess it's up to you guys as far as how you feel about the siding. I know we're kind of letting a couple other houses in town have a pass, at least for a while on that.
I feel that one's cleaned out and
Yeah,
done to what we asked them to do.
okay.
Okay. All right. Guess that one's pretty much taken care of. Next.
Do we have building codes in this town?
What's in the ordinances, that's all I can tell you.
No, I don't know that either, I'm just curious, do we have building codes like for, like foundations or something like that?
Dangerous and hazardous buildings.
You have chapter 50, which is your nuisance code, which we'll get into that a bit, and then chapter 145, dangerous building. Some cities have another chapter, it's usually around 145, it's more building maintenance. So, because dangerous building kind of connotates not just it's not painted, but there's something kind of dangerous about it. It could fall, it could hurt the people inside, it could hurt somebody else. Where your maintenance chapter is a little bit more tied to just, it's an eyesore, it's bringing down values in the neighborhood, it looks bad, the neighbors whose house next door is devalued arguably because of the way it's being kept up or maintained. But under your chapter 145, talks about unsafe buildings, various inadequacies, inadequate maintenance, which would get to the paint part. Then it talks about how you notice the owner and things you do in that regard. But as far as the building code, no building code, haven't adopted what things like the International Property Maintenance Code or any of those types of codes, which isn't unusual for a city your size. If you start adopting all that, you gotta, then you really should think about, well, if we adopted all, who's enforcing it?
Yeah, that's right,
So,
yeah. Thank you.
you bet.
So I have a question, since I'm the one sitting holding this big stack of file of unabated property what do we do with the properties that are still in limbo? You know, that have, you haven't sent the letters yet. I mean, I think they the council picked what was gonna go to you. Are we, and that, when I guess you guys did, there was no response. So the letters that went to you were chosen by, you've marked file to the attorney.
Okay.
So what do I do with properties that may have, they're either not, they're not up to code, or they're not in the correct, we don't know if they're in the correct zoning, you know, and we're still in limbo with these.
Yeah.
Cause I get asked this, it's a daily thing almost.
Two separate issues, kind of. One, when we talk zoning, we're talking property use, usually. Is it being used consistent or inconsistent with the zoning classification? There's a lot of questions that go with that. And then on the property maintenance standpoint, it's either chapter 50 or chapter 145 that we're looking at. I would suggest, you know, if we've got notices that ECIA has sent out, there's really nothing happening, no response, and they're saying we can't get anywhere, and then go to the next step. It might be wise before it comes to me, and maybe it already does this, that it would flow through the council and say, here are the properties that ECIA has been working with, here's the pictures, here's what it looks like, here's any complaints we've received, how we identified this as an issue. You know, do you want us to take that next step, have it come to me? You know, and I can do this two ways, but by the time it gets to me, there's been a number of letters sent out, or attempts to do something. So if it came to me, I could send another letter. But at some point, before the city would move forward with what I'll call formal legal action, we have to send something called a notice and order to abate. And in your code, it kind of gives certain procedures. You know, you gotta identify, here's the issues, here's the code section involved, here's what you need to do to bring it into compliance, here's your time frame to bring it into compliance, here's your opportunity to appeal. If you're unhappy with what we're saying in here, you can request an appeal within a certain number of days. We'll set it for a hearing with council. If they don't do any of that, then the next step is to file what's called a municipal infraction citation with the Jones County District Court, which is typically a magistrate level type hearing. Serve the property owner, they have to appear and plead guilty or not guilty, like a criminal case, but it's not criminal, it's civil. And then a trial date would get set, and I would be there with one or two of you to present evidence, or the ECIA to say this is the notices that were sent out and how it's in violation of the code. And whoever we cite can be there to say this is why they don't think it's in code, or why they think it's okay, not in violation. And then a judge decides. And what the judge decides is, what's the penalty? Do we penalize them? In addition to a penalty, do we order them to bring it into compliance? How long do we give them? If they don't bring it into compliance, there will be language in the court order that says they can be held in contempt of court for not bringing it into compliance. If it's a house that we really can't even find the owner, we know it's owned, but we've served them, they don't show up, and it's so bad it just needs to go, the court order can say it needs to be demolished, and the city can demolish it and assess the demolition costs of the taxes. So those are all things, depending on a case-by-case basis, that we'd ask for. So, and another, let me not jump too far off here, but if you, on the vacant piece, and I don't know if you have any of these, but let's say you have a vacant property in town that's in bad shape. It's been vacant for over 6 months. You can file what's called a 657A, that's a chapter of the Iowa Code, declaring it to be a vacant and abandoned property. You file a petition in court again with the magistrate, laying out, nobody lives there, haven't for over 6 months. There's no utilities, taxes are delinquent, there's holes in the window, it's been subject to prior code enforcement action. There's a number of things in the code. The more of those, the better. So you name a bunch of those, you file your action, and you go to court like you would with a municipal infraction citation. If the owner shows up, great. If they don't, you still proceed. In the end, you get an order from the court saying you now own the property. And good and bad, right? Because now you own that problem property, you're in control of it. You can demolish it, you can sell it, you can do what you want with it, and you keep all the revenues from that. But you have those potential expenses. You might, along the way, find a property like that. You find the property owner, that owner says, I'll just give it to you. Sounds good, you don't have to hire me, you don't have to go to court. And sometimes it is okay. But if they just give it to you, they sign a deed, give it to the city, any judgments and liens and other things on that property come with it. So if they owe somebody child support, if there's a mortgage on it, all those things are now tied to the property that you own. Where if you go through the 657A process, all of that gets wiped out, so you get clear title. And before we file a 657A, we do a title report so we know kind of what's out there, because we have to serve those people with notice. So if there's a mortgage holder or a judgment holder, they get notice that the city's gonna try to take this property. They could step in theory, and try to take it, but then they have to bring it up to code, and that doesn't usually happen.
We do have one, you did send a letter
Okay.
that falls under those
Yep.
terms, so. Miller's house. Okay. Right. And some of ours, just so everybody knows. Oops. See that? Well, that's not smart either. Okay, so this here are all abatement letters, just so everybody knows, that's what these all are in here. So these are letters, it's not been picking on one person, you guys have worked hard to do this, there's a lot of them in here. Some of these people in here have gotten 3, 4 letters and no response at all. So that's what we're trying to, working hard to take care of, because, do you mind if I speak to this?
Nope, you're
Steve?
fine.
Sorry.
You go ahead.
So during the comprehensive plan, because I was on city council for a while, and we did do a comprehensive plan. So there was a survey sent out to everybody in town. I think some of you probably filled it out, I did. And the survey was, what do you want to happen here in town? What's the most important thing that you want to see happen in Wyoming, Iowa? Number one thing was clean the town up. Number one thing, hands down. So the council took action to hire these guys to come in so that we are completely, we don't make the decisions on who gets a letter, what the letter says, anything like that. These guys go out and they do their job by driving through town and I believe I'm getting this right, looking for nuisances. Then they send the letters to us, and then we look at them and they send them out to the property owners. So it's completely unbiased on the council's part on where these letters are coming from and who's going to give a letter. It comes from E.C. Hogg and our housing specialists here. Well, now we're sitting with this big stack of letters, and it's to the point where we have to make a decision on what we're going to do with them, because it's 3 and 4 letters, and we're paying these guys to go out and do them, and some of them are just like, you know, another letter, okay, no response, not a phone call, don't show up at City Hall, don't call and ask for an extension, anything like that. So we're getting to the point now where the council's frustrated, because every single month I have to bring these to them, and nothing's getting done. And so that's why we're at the point where we're at right now, is trying to get some of this taken care of. So some of the people that have received 3 and 4 letters or more are going to, I think the decision was to move a little bit more on them. So this was an opportunity for people to come in who may have received a letter to come in and ask for an extension or give their thoughts on what we're doing, or do you want to continue to do it, you know, but it was for the benefit of the town, the whole entire town. So that's my take on that one.
Anything else? Sir, I see you moved up to the front. Do you have something? Oh, you're just trying to hear?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Okay, and I'm not picking, but I would like to discuss, if you guys don't mind, your property, Nathan and Pam. I know at one point in time, the last council meeting that they came to, they found an exemption in the code, and I don't remember what the answer back was. That something about the previous use was good when the last, I can't remember the detail for now. But I know Pam found that in the code, and we looked it up that night.
Just a general comment, when we're talking zoning issue, right? Kind of?
I believe it is, yes, it's a zoning, yes.
Yeah, from a zoning standpoint, the properties are given a certain classification. Those change, they can change over time. The city council's changing, you can amend your zoning ordinance, and that's happened here in town. It doesn't mean the whole thing changes, it just means you made, one of them was a real little change. from 67 to maybe 90 or 85, somewhere in there, you changed part of the zoning code to get rid of 0 lot line duplexes and make it a commercial. You gave a specific legal description of a property impact. So a pretty minor change. Sometimes councils go through, you do a comprehensive planning, you look at the whole community, and you do kind of more overall updating, which again doesn't mean everything changes, only some change. And to make a change, you have to have public hearings, you have to have 3 readings of ordinance, so there's a lot to go through to make that happen. When you have a zoning code, so let's say a property, for example, is zoned C1 in 1967, the code in 1967 says here's permitted uses. These are the things you can do. If it's not listed as a permitted use, sometimes code says here's conditional uses that you might be able to do. When I look at your codes, I think you kinda got the permitted uses, you don't really have the conditional use categories. So you said, here's the permitted uses. In C1 you can do this, in C2 you can do this, in industrial 1 you can do this, industrial 2 you can do this. So let's say you have a property that's zoned C2 in 1967, and it says you can have a gas station. And the gas station's there and it's operating 1985, you change it to C1, you can't have a gas station anymore. Well, you still can on that property because it's an existing non-conforming use, and it's still in operation, and it's still running as a gas station, okay? So it would continue to be, I'll use the word that isn't really a law, but it's a word people are familiar with, it'd be grandfathered. So it could continue. If that use ever stopped, and sometimes your code will say this, I mean, if it stops for a week and starts back up, new owner, that's really not stopping. If that gas station closes and it's out of business for a period of years, it's no longer an existing non-conforming. Now it has to come into compliance. Okay? So I think that's kind of what's being discussed with this property. And I don't know the history of the property enough as far as exactly what it was used for, when it was used for, to probably answer a direct question whether it's currently an existing non-conforming use or not. What we need to know is, I think we go back to 67, because we know we had a code then. What was its use then? And what was its zoning then?
Okay.
And we now know it's changed. I think we think it was C2.
It was service retail in
Yep.
67.
Yep.
And then it went to C1, and now it is C2. And service retail, C1 and C2, never changed, you know, on when they did that, updating of the code for those,
Right.
so.
What's
and
C2, like commercial, or?
C2 is like commercial, yes.
And again, once you get to that, it talks about here's your permitted use, so, yeah, so I guess those are the key factors, and I don't know, I won't be able to answer that tonight, but I think the key factors are how it was used, in what period of time, did those uses stop, and it wasn't used for anything for a while, when did the zoning change, you kind of put that together, you know, scale that over time and see where we're at today.
Do we have the breakdown from Nathan and Pam, you know, it was Lehrman, obviously you were selling tractors from here to here, and then after that, when the tractor implement closed, so to speak, then you started the trailers, and when the code changes.
There was also still here.
Do you have that info?
In 2001, the South Midland Times, we were still selling grain
Farm
bins and
equipment.
farm equipment.
Okay,
So,
And
I don't see C2 in your code. I see C1 and central and C1 light. Class C central and class C1 is light commercial. And our property, according to your map, is C1 light commercial.
You guys this is the current map, and you're light commercial.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we're saying.
Yeah,
It's
there's no
it's
C.
not C, yeah, it's just, they
C2.
kind of took that out of it. They did central commercial, which would be the down to where we're
Yeah.
at now,
It
And
goes
light
on the size of
commercial.
the
and
lot.
light commercial, yeah.
And it just means
And
that we have a
so
bigger size
here-
lot.
Here is the C1, R2, C1, and C. So you were at that time C1. This is, sorry, 2005 is this one. And then in 1967, you were C2, right here, C2.
Service retail.
Service retail, that's
Yeah.
C2, yeah. So, and you guys seen this, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there was a C2, it was in 67. You guys were C2 then. But, and that 67 went until They didn't change the map so much as they changed the,
Classifications.
yeah, the classifications. So they left the map like this, and then they just changed the classifications, and that was in, gosh, I don't remember. Cause I was like, where is that other map at? Well, that's why, cause they didn't do a different map. And then they didn't actually do a new zoning map until 2005, is when they did a new zoning map. And you stayed, your classification stayed the same. So they they changed the classifications in like 2001 or 2002.
It was 2001,
Yeah, and
because I have the city council write up in the Midland Times where my father-in-law did go to the meeting and questioned what would happen, and the city clerk at the time said that existing structures and uses are grandfathered in and will not be changed. Each new case will be handled on an individual basis. So there are multiple properties in Wyoming that have been grandfathered in apparently, because there's, I think, probably 7 or 8 that we've counted that don't technically meet the zoning code. So I understand that you want the trailers to be cleaned up. You want the property cleaned up. The property is rented to Somerville Trucking. Nathan went through with Lou and all of his employees, and the junk trailers have been removed. He did have a few that needed to go.
Everything's licensed.
Yeah, everything's
sealed.
licensed.
Everything's for sale or rent.
Yep, some of the trailer,
It's
the
no different
doors
than if
didn't
it was
close before.
It's no different than if it was a machinery dealership, just like it was originally. Everything is for sale or rent. Still now today, everything is for sale or rent.
Some of the doors didn't close in the original pictures that you guys had sent. Those have all been taken care of. Everything's closed, sealed. Some of the trailers had sunk. Obviously, everything's been lifted up.
Everything's been cleaned up.
We did have tires in front of our shop building that we use. Nathan took care of all the tires. Those have all been removed. Property's mowed regularly. Maybe some weeds grew up under the trailers, but those will be taken care of.
Been taken care of.
They have been, yes,
Everything's
but
been done.
in the
We did
future,
everything
it
that the
will
council
continue
asked.
to be taken care of.
The biggest reason I wanted to bring this up is just so we can get the last final, because the last question that we had when we talked that night, because there was the concern about the other buildings, did they have the variance? You found that ordinance
Yeah, the grandfathered part.
that talked about in our book that grandfathered the uses in.
And it says it
We
too
just
in
wanted to
the
make sure that
meeting minutes.
since it's still, they're for sale or rent, does it still qualify?
Yep, there's signage there.
I'm sorry.
There's signage there. And everything, you know, it's, there's no junk on the property.
Okay, I'd say there is a difference between grandfathering and variance. Something that's grandfathered, again, is what we would call an existing non-conforming permitted use. So it was permitted, but because you changed the code, it's now not permitted, but because it existed, it's allowed to continue, okay? But if it continues, fine. If it continues and stops, then then there's some case law in this and that we'd look at if this was an issue we want to look at. Let's say the farm machinery business stopped and the truck trailer storage or outside use for sale rent started 5 years later. That's probably lost its non-conforming status because that business stopped. It isn't a permanent forever you can be out of compliance. It's a permanent forever if your business keeps continuing, but if it ends for an amount of time, then you've got to bring it into compliance. You lose that grandfathered status, if you will, okay? And then if you lose your grandfathered status, you're like, well, we really want to still do this, then you come to the Board of Adjustment and say, we want a variance because we lost our non-conforming status, but we want you to give us a special exception, if you will, to allow us to do something different than what the code allows. And that's where the variance comes into play, and that's a Board of Adjustment decision. So that gets into that timeline, and you guys all have a better feel, you guys definitely do, what it was used for and when it was used. You know, if we go back to, and I think this is what you end up looking at, but when you look at 1967 ordinance, under C2, it talked about, I'm sorry, let me find that here. It talked about vehicle drive-in and heavy vehicle service, drive-in theaters, drive-in restaurants, refreshment stands, express, cartage, and trucking facilities, large item machinery or bulk sales and storage, not including outdoor unfenced storage, okay? So that was in your 1967 code. So that's another point I wanna make, and I don't know all the facts, but if something was being done in 1967 and we changed the code later, it doesn't get grandfathered or permitted as a non-conforming use if it wasn't legal when it was happening, okay? So, I'll use a bigger example. Let's say that it was a residential house that was being used as a gas station in 1967, totally out of compliance with your code, but it just happened and nobody said anything. That doesn't become a permitted use because it wasn't legal to start with, okay? So, in thinking of this case, the thing I caught under that, or saw under C2 that caught my attention was not including outdoor unfenced storage. So that's a question for you to consider when you look at this. Other things that are in your code, and you'd have to look at this property, if the outside storage for sale and rent of these trailers is decided to be okay and or legal. The other things that come into play in your code, and I didn't look at great detail because I didn't know if we were there yet. Fencing, where it should be, how high it needs to be, the style, screening from residential neighborhoods, setbacks from streets, from adjacent property, from intersections, off-street parking and loading. Those are all provisions in your code that apply to C2 uses. And I don't know if this property is in compliance with any of those or not. Or, I'm sorry, that was C2 and 67. Similar provisions now for its current zoning classification. So, again, I'm not trying to create problems, I'm just saying those are the things to consider, and that's why the timeline of the property is pretty important to know what was being used as when.
So what?
What year did Marlin close the equipment store?
Quit being an international dealership in 1982, but Lehrman Equipment still exists. Lehrman Equipment owns the property,
But it's
Lehrman
that empty
Equipment.
down there, with that stuff sitting there, I know. But it's that empty until Lou didn't start trucking until 84. 85.
Lou was parking big bills of stuff down there.
Well, I worked big bills,
Well, I'm telling you that there was hoppers and tankers got parked down there. And then Marvin Null parked his construction equipment down there too.
Yeah, well, I'm just asking, because
I'm just
he was
I'm
saying
just
something about it was
answering your
sitting empty,
questions.
and I know it was empty for a while. But
Yeah, we let Roy and Marvy park their stuff down there until they built the shop out of town.
That property's all up to date now anyway, right?
It's looking much better. There is a sign there that says vehicles or trailers for sale and rent. There wasn't one there last year saying for rent, for sale.
No, but I mean, what we asked them to do.
Right,
They got
so yeah, all the trailers do look much better. I drove by through there just the other day, and I thought to myself, wow, that looks a lot better than what it did. There are still a lot of trailers there, but I think the bad ones have been disappeared.
Like, they're all licensed.
Yeah.
Other maybe one or two that are brand new that they haven't went into service yet.
You kind of reorganized them too, didn't you?
They organized all of them,
Yeah,
everything.
that's what I thought.
Moved everything.
It looks good, Nathan.
Yeah.
They've already
Thank you.
sold like at
I
least
think it looks
5
good
of them.
too.
It does. And like I said, we had some questions that last meeting, and I just thought this would be a good time to try to,
So what does it take? We've been going through this with them guys for so long and putting them through the ringer. They've done everything we've asked them to do. What can we do to put this thing to bed?
I guess we can have a discussion one last time next, in 2 weeks, at our council meeting, and if everybody is happy with the way it is right now, I believe.
It does not have to go through a board of adjustment meeting then? We don't have to do that?
No, I guess we better.
I guess what are the ramifications? I mean, it's great if we can get it done, I just don't want it to come back and bite us in the butt with different properties, so.
Well, it sure could,
Yeah,
regardless of what.
that's what I was,
But the gentleman over there really about property maintenance and nuisance, more than zoning, would that be a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay, so what they're saying is from the chapter 50 standpoint, the junk's gone, the things are cleaned up, things are licensed, it looks better, pretty compliant, which is good for you guys to hear. The zoning issue, and I guess we just don't know the answer to that, but if you're of a mind sitting here today thinking, well, based on what we do know, we're okay with allowing it to be continued to use in that fashion for the outside storage of trailers with no fencing, not worry about any of these other things. You can do that. you're basically making the decision that you think it's compliant, okay? I don't know if it is or it isn't, I don't know if any of us do really, in that regard. The Board of Adjustment is where they would go if you made a decision that it's not compliant. You're out of compliance with zoning, you're in compliance with chapter 50, we're happy with that, but you're not compliant with zoning. If you want an exception / variance, you need to go to the Board of Adjustment and make your pitch. Board of Adjustment, I'm probably telling you things some of you know, but they don't make recommendations to you, they actually make decisions. They're an adjudicated body, where like a judge and a jury. Planning and Zoning Board makes recommendations to you. So once it goes to the Board of Adjustment, they hear the facts and evidence, they make a decision, either approve the variance or deny it. If the owners are unhappy, or if you're unhappy, or if a neighbor's unhappy, then they can file suit in district court to challenge the granting of a variance. And under Iowa code, variances are almost always illegal, just as a side note. If you end up fighting one, variances should almost never be granted, but if nobody fights them, they're fine. So in this case, again, I think you can make that decision, but as Tammy pointed out, if we run into another property that you believe is non-compliant and you're forcing the issue, it would open the door to them saying, well, you let that use continue, even though maybe it had stopped for a while, or maybe it wasn't fully compliant, it didn't have fencing as required, or screening as required, or whatever, and now you want me to do it, and that's not fair. So that's something that could come up when you're doing enforcement. The first thing that people often do when they get a letter is they start pointing the finger.
I've gotten that, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm only asking from that standpoint,
Yep.
is if we make a decision, because I have letters
Yeah.
that we've received that if something's not done certain way, you know, and there's forgiveness for one person, they expect to see it for others. So that, and I've shared those with the council, so I'm just pointing that out, that just make sure we do the right thing, because I don't want us to, whatever the decision is, you know.
If you ever send out letters to tell people to fix their sidewalks, the year before you do that, you better fix every city sidewalk, because they're gonna go look at every city sidewalk. So, anyway, it's hard for me to judge that property, it's hard for me to judge whether it truly is okay as it is, because I don't know the timeline well enough, and I'm not sure, it would be something, with help of the owners and staff, looking at old minutes and whatever, pencil that out and see, and then say, okay, well that, the outside storage of vehicles in 1967, heavy vehicle service trucking facilities, it was okay, it said storage, but not including outdoor unfenced storage. That was in 67, and that's probably still carried forward. So the unfenced piece maybe was always a violation. So if that was always a violation, it's not anything that's been grandfathered, if that makes sense. So, and I would say if when the council's looking at some of these things, and this comes up from time to time, if you're looking at your city code and say, well, why do we need that fenced? Okay, maybe you should then you need to change your code. Because if your code says it should be fenced, and you don't think it should, you should change your code so it doesn't apply to anybody that's similarly situated. Nobody should then have to fence.
And some of these fences they put up are pretty tacky looking anyway. I'd rather not have a fence than some of the fences they put up nowadays.
So do we want to get the timeline then from Nathan and Pam? With some dates and stuff like that of when this was going on, So then we can have Doug review this, or what do you guys wanna do?
I think we got everything here.
I think we do too.
It's all good, drop it off, and just drop it, be done with it.
As long as we keep it,
Looking nice?
So you're happy with the code part of it, okay? All right, then that is fine.
So does that make it okay for the guy that has no siding up on the hill to have to put siding up for people also not to have to paint their house to make it look good? It's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, if I was that guy, I'd be mad that these people don't have to do it, but I have to do it.
It's a very valid point.
I mean, it has nothing to do with me, but, you're gonna upset people if they.
My guy had holes in the roofs and broken out window, I mean, it's different.
Yeah.
Is it?
Just deteriorated siding.
It was-
on that property.
It had holes in the, critters going in and out, no windows in the house at all.
But it's hard not to be, you can't be subjective and say, well, I'm okay with this one like this, but
Right.
not this one like this. That's what we have to be very careful of.
Yeah.
Because you guys know, I've got 300 letters in here, and every one of them you can be able to say, you know, so either we follow the rules and the ordinance, you know, and the laws the way we have them written, or we need to change it, you know what I mean,
Right.
to, for,
But having said that, we're picking on people that's done everything we've asked them to do.
I'm not
And then we're
disagreeing
telling
with
them
that.
that this won't work anymore.
I know, I'm not.
We can't do that.
I'm not disagreeing with that, Lee, at all. All I'm saying is that I agree with you guys. But what I'm saying is what Nick just mentioned is exactly what we're gonna get, is the next people are gonna watch this, and they're gonna come in and say, well, you made an exception for somebody else. So guess what? You know, I just want you to be aware of that.
But
Just-
if they're following the letter of the law that we've given them. So I don't see where the conflict is if one person has
But
done
if-
everything the letter has said and another person's not, so you're not comparing
So
apples to apples.
if it's all, yes, it is, if they're following the letter of the law to what it's gotta be to what the zoning is for that. So if the zoning, am I correct on that?
Well, I think what I'm gathering is they're following what the city requested with
Yes.
regard to junk
It
vehicles,
looks
cleaning things up.
amazing compared to what it did.
But I know at least some of the correspondence, after it was brought to me and we looked at it, I think, and maybe before me, but I know I identified, we've got nuisance and we've got zoning. We got two things at play. We've got maybe junk vehicles and we've got, should any vehicles be there, right? They're really two separate issues.
Yes.
And the point in the audience is the guy who needs to pay nuisance property maintenance. This is largely zoning. But more generally, I think the point is the council's maybe ignoring the zoning issue, so why not ignore the paint issue? So I understand both sides of that. It's hard, I think, too, and it's all about enforcement, and if your code says some things, you really should enforce it. If you look at your code and like, well, why are we worried about that? You should really take it out. And I don't know, seeing some aerials of this property, and they probably aren't current. Are any of these trailers located in what I'll call the setback? Are they too close to a street? Are they 15, 25 feet off? Is there a street intersection? There's supposed to be a clear space around the corner for safety. They're supposed to be back. Is that compliant? And I'm not looking for issues. Those are in your code. There are things that are supposed to be met as part of, and there's sometimes those rules are different depending on the zoning. Whether it's C1, C2, not that those are your zoning ordinances. But, so ultimately where you sit today, it is your decision. If you look at it and say on one hand, we don't really know, again, if it's compliant or not compliant with zoning. There's some evidence that there's been continued use. We don't know if it was compliant originally, at least on the fencing piece. If you folks, after hearing what you've heard, decide, you know what, based on what we've heard, we find it's compliant with our zoning code. And it's been brought up to code on the nuisance front. If you make that decision, that's your right to do so. But again, what's been said, somebody else could come forward and say, I don't know how you made that decision, because here are the problems with that decision. It doesn't meet setback here, it's supposed to have a fence, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. So you just, and I don't know if you'll face those kind of questions or not, but I sat in council meetings for 16 years, and usually the people that are here are the ones that are unhappy with something. The ones that are happy with what you're doing aren't here, but they're still watching. And they're the ones who will call the clerk's office or one of you privately, because they don't want to be here in public making a stink.
So in summary, you don't know and we don't know if they're, because of history, we don't know if they're zoned properly or improperly anyway, is that correct?
I don't know enough of the background facts, correct?
And so the only way to get that is to go back to 1960s and start looking at all the notes from there forward?
Well, I think the property owners can give quite a bit of background when this was there and when that was there, and Tammy's done a little background too. When I go, just an easy example, the 67 ordinance says you can't have any outdoor unfenced storage. So there's one issue right out of the gate. Even if these can be stored outside, 1967 it was supposed to be fenced in. And I'm not saying you want a fence, because I agree sometimes fences look worse than no fence. But that's what the code said in 67, and we could look forward in the code and see what it says.
Well, I'm his neighbor, and the trailers and stuff look way better than they used to.
Yeah, I'm his neighbor too, and I think they look great.
Right across the street.
What about the trailer at the old gas station? Does
Yeah.
that one look okay?
That is
And
a
that's
whole
zoned the
separate
same
deal.
too. It's zoned, I think that's zoned
I mean,
exactly the same.
that's the problem, I think, that you're running into.
But yet it's the same issue.
Mhm.
It's the same, the siding and not painted, you know, he's siding it to make it look better and doing his windows, whatever, they don't need windows. But, I mean, you got a whole bunch of stuff you have to figure out, in my opinion. We wanna everybody wants to make the town look better. Nobody wants, you know, a town. Nate has done a good job over there of trying to make it look the best he can. He's, you know, which I've lived next to him for 14 years and, you know, it's probably the best it's ever looked, which is great, but then you're still that trailer in Kenyon's, you know, that's a whole nother game there.
And he has received a letter, too. I believe, one for sure, maybe two. So we're on the verge of that one, and he did come into City Hall and wanted to, and had specifically asked about the other trailers in town. So that's the reason why, because I'm the one that gets the questions and then pass them on to you guys. So I'm fine. I mean, obviously, I don't care what you do. I just want to make sure it's a decision based upon the whole town. You know what I mean? On what you're gonna face with what the decision is. You're making the decision for the town, you know?
So basically, we're down to the zoning issue yet, still with that piece. The cleanup, we all agree that is.
And the nuisance, what do you get to define as nuisance? Not painted house, a not sided house.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
You know.
that's, yeah.
They're both nuisances, but.
Well, he chose to cite that on his own, right? I mean, we just asked for the roof fix and the windows. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So the siding, he wasn't asked to cite, he chose to do
The
that.
way he said it,
No,
you know.
he's doing that on his own.
Okay.
What would be the best option for the city to allow Lernerman's to continue business like they're doing, but not allow a semi-trailer to pop up, you know, at a different property and just sit there? I mean, what's the best way to work around that?
Well, the best way would probably be to look at your very current code, and that's zone C1, or no?
No.
It's some.
Yeah, it's,
I'm sorry.
yours light commercial right now, Nate? Yeah, light commercial.
Okay, so it's zone light commercial. I think if the council look at, we're happy with it so long as it's not a nuisance. They're all licensed, operable, non-nuisance condition, not junk, they're for sale, for lease. Would be to look at your current ordinance and make that a permitted use. Take the question out of the past, you know, we don't care whether it was permitted in the past, not permitted in the past. We're gonna look at our current code and say the outside unfenced storage of tractors, trailers, farm equipment, machinery, whatever you wanna group in that category, is permissible in that zoning classification. When you do that, then you'd wanna look at all other property on your map in that zoning classification and be sure you're comfortable with that spreading to all those others. Or you say, you know what, we're comfortable with all of that in industrial, I-1, for example. And then you rezone that to I-1. That way you avoid giving all other similarly situated C properties the right to start storing out, you know, tractors and trailers and whatnot. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think that takes, that gets us out of the whole, what's the history? We don't care anymore.
Okay.
Well, I care if it's industrial.
Well, I understand what you're saying.
You know, if Nate decides, you know what, I don't want it this anymore, sells it and to somebody else and then.
Yeah, well, maybe you make it C1A, you know, you can be creative. And maybe that piece of property is the only one zoned a certain way in the whole town. And it's very limited to kind of that current kind of use. Because I get your point too, if you make it industrial, all of a sudden the owner says, well, yeah, Somerville sold all his trailers, now what are we gonna do? And we start a factory.
Yes.
Not that that would happen, but.
Well,
think it would either, but.
Yeah, no, valid point.
I like what you're saying, though, we could do that and make it a conditional zoning, is that what you're saying?
Not really conditional zoning, it would be its own new zoning classification that says that use is permitted.
And then it could apply to someplace else in town for,
If you change the zoning map,
Yep.
like you said, if you made it if it's just light commercial, right? Right now?
Is that the current one?
No.
No,
it's
the green one.
Green one? So we're over here, right? In this,
Yes.
this property? So if we just change the current light commercial to say everything that's happening there's basically legal, take care of the fencing, everything else, and applied it to that zoning classification, that would allow that use here, here, all these properties, and these, all those kind of yellow colored properties. So if you look at that and say, we're okay with it here, but we really don't like it here, or here, everything else is okay, maybe then, we've got these classifications now, maybe you add one more classification, and these become a different color. And those are the ones that can have that kind of use.
so in a sense, we're not showing any favoritism at this point. We can, because we're making it possible for all those areas that you're highlighted, rezone them the same as what we would do for that piece over there.
But you could pick and choose though too, like you said, because you wouldn't necessarily have to do all, like you said, if you didn't like, I can't tell because I don't see the colors.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is where I'm struggling because of the layout.
These look kinda odd to me, right in the middle of the community, I'm not sure what's there, is that maybe Somerville's even?
That's,
That should be Dollar General and Casey's.
Well,
Franzen's now.
Franzen's now.
That's just a little more downtown looking
See,
than
that
some
was
of these.
a infamous store one time too.
Okay. But, a lot of times, so if these were made, let's just say this property and these, and that one, these three kinda out on the perimeter are allowed to have this kind of use. That doesn't mean they can't do probably what they're doing now either, so let's just say, we've got these light commercial now, we've already got a central commercial, so let's say we add a heavy commercial, okay, and that's what we're gonna make these, heavy commercial. If, in the heavy commercial, they'd still be permitted to do anything allowed in light commercial. So, usually you're allowed to do lower classification stuff. Even in commercial in Wyoming in your code, if you're commercial, you can build a house on it. If you're industrial, you can use commercial on it, but you can't build a house. Because that just makes sense, you'll end up with nuisances and people complaining about each other. But a heavy commercial could use a light commercial, could in theory do a central commercial. The big difference between, with the central commercial being your downtown, the biggest difference there is there's usually no setbacks. Because you're right up on the right of way and building to building. So a central commercial is usually a downtown district. Light commercial is usually just outside of the downtown or more of your inner city commercial areas. Heavier commercials out on the edge of town, usually a little bigger lot, where a little bit more noise or disturbance or outside storage isn't quite as big a deal. And then industrial is a step further yet. Okay. So I think, that's not showing favoritism in my mind either, because you're gonna look at your community and say, these lots and these 5 spots, we can let them do a bit more. And you're gonna treat all of them the same.
Yeah, boy, that seems the best option to me. Cause I really don't want Tammy getting a letter saying, well, how come you did this for Lerman's and not for somebody else?
I'm loving this idea, so
Yeah,
that's great.
but I think that we can get this done and put it to bed then, right?
We got to probably do it the next meeting, don't we?
Well,
Well, it takes
no,
time.
it'll take a little bit. It's
Well, I
not gonna
understand
happen
that, but-
overnight.
No, I know.
But we can get the ball rolling
Yeah.
to do it. So we could we could just start with the light commercial, and we could go through that one and see if we wanna make changes and the changes in the property. Then once we get done with that one, as we get the ordinance then changed, then we can start the next one. But I feel that if we're gonna do one, we need to go through all.
I agree with
That
that.
have to go through planning and zoning?
When you change zoning, you do. You have to take it to planning and zoning for their review and recommendation.
So then we'll have to send, once we get our recommendation for that one, then we'll have to send it to planning and zoning, have them review it. And then if they agree with it, get the ordinance changed,
Yep.
pass them, and then we go from there.
So what would it be classified as, rezoning, that you were talking 5 properties?
Well, when I say 5, I wasn't really meaning 5 properties, as I was 5 areas possibly, and I don't know if they would decide that or not. I was just looking at the, can you see from there the gold colored stuff?
Yep.
That would be, those are all zoned the same right now as light commercial. What I was saying is maybe some of those could be rezoned as heavy commercial, and then you'd modify your rules to allow a little bit more, something kind of between commercial and industrial, where you have this outside storage and sale yards, for example. And maybe the property we're talking about tonight is the only one that should be changed.
Dodges would have to be changed too.
So,
Yeah.
but I think,
Change that.
I think the first thing the council would do is just look at everything that's light commercial and say, can we modify that to make this perfectly legal without creating a new classification? But however you modify it, then it's gonna be applied to all of these, and my point was maybe some of these light commercial, you really wanna stay light commercial. You don't want them having outside storage of semis and tractors and
Right,
trailers and such.
right.
And if you decide that, then you really need to create that new classification.
No, I'm on the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
I've just to pipe in here. I've looked at other cities' code regarding zoning, and when Wyoming's code for industrial or zoning for industrial is not really like industrial.
It's not manufacturing.
You know, if you look at other cities, their city code is industrial. Our industrial is more like heavy commercial.
Because of the shop.
It's just and I'm sure it's because we're a small town and, you know, it's just how, I'm sure there was a difference in what was recommended for the city to adopt because of the size of our town. And that's probably what happened.
Some cities have light industrial and heavy industrial both.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, for example, Monticello had both, and after looking at the entire code for a while, we're like, why do we have both?
Yeah,
You know, let's
you
just
know,
have the one.
Annapolis is the same way.
Yeah.
They've got, their industrial is true industrial.
It's factory.
Yeah. So. So heavy commercial sounds good. And there is more than one property that would be affected by that.
Sound like a plan for next month?
Yeah. Does that mean they're gonna quit getting letters?
We can, yes, we can.
Okay.
Any of them that, well, okay, obviously those, the Lehrmans will, but when we look at the map, if there's anybody else in those other areas, then we can, address that issue at the next council meeting.
That makes sense.
Now,
So-
does this involve, we have to have public meetings and stuff before we go into a zoning change?
You don't have to have public meetings during your discussion and kind of planning, but when you're gonna get to a point where you wanna move forward, you have to have a public hearing
Okay,
before you can consider your first reading.
okay.
I've actually had cities, that's my preferred route, I've had other cities say, well, we like to pass our first reading, be sure the council's on board, and then we have our public hearing. My take is, the reason for the public hearing is public input, so you should get that before you consider your first reading.
So I do have one more question. So if it was if you had a few of these properties zoned heavy commercial and you had a bad actor or a bad steward managing the property, would it give them the ability to let weeds grow up and have junk vehicles on it at that point?
You know, no matter what the zoning is, the chapter 50 still applies, so the nuisance, junk vehicles, junk, grass, you'd wanna look at that, cause sometimes in code, when it comes to grass, the further you get from residential, the longer you can let your grass grow. So it might say residential 6 inches, commercial 8 inches, industrial 10 inches, so you might wanna look at that when we're looking at making these changes. But no, all properties still have to be maintained in compliance with those regardless of the zoning classification. And I would think too, when you're looking at this situation, you could take a look at your industrial zoning. It does allow manufacturing, you know, right, whatever that means. However likely or unlikely that is, the door is open to manufacturing, which can be noisier and dustier and all those things. So you might not wanna move this just into manufacturing or into industrial, unless you thought about some change to that manufacturing language. The last thing I'll say on zoning, and I won't get in the weeds on it, but you can't legally spot zone, okay? You can't for example, pick a lot out in the middle of town and say, we're gonna make that industrial. It's surrounded by residential, or we're gonna make that commercial, it's surrounded by all residential. So we'll just have to keep that in mind when you're looking at the map and what you think makes sense. If things are grouped together, then it makes, there's a rational basis for doing it, you're fine. But spot zoning is, I guess just very, very general with how I describe it, but where you're just dropping a zoning classification right in the middle of a bunch of different zoning, and that's prohibited.
Okay. Yes?
As a property owner and resident, also a property tax paying person, I wanna thank the council and the mayor and the clerk's office for doing the nuisance and ECOG, cause I feel it is very important to the city to maintain it. Tammy has said there's been like 3 letters sent to several people. Go after them, get it to the attorney, make them know that the city means business. Otherwise, you're wasting all of your efforts, all of these efforts, not to mention the money that you're paying these guys. So, keep up the good work and nail it to them.
Okay, do we have any other comments, questions, concerns on the nuisance properties and abatements? Yes, sir.
Yeah. I got a letter, I kinda ignored them, but I thought I'd just clean up. My daughter had what you do, she put it in storage, her car. I got her to remove that, and I got a camper that has been brought up. I'm not gonna camp anymore, I'm trying to get rid of it now. It's always been licensed and always been insured. So, anything else on that?
Can you tell,
307 West Green Street.
that way he can look it up and address it with,
And I've looked at my property a little better. I think I need to clean up a little more.
we appreciate that.
West Green.
Green. West Green, 307.
Haven't cited it recently.
I thought we just, got rid of the stuff or whatever, that was it.
If you clean it up, you don't need to contact, it'll be, when we do
Yeah.
re-inspection, if it's cleaned
Yeah.
up, it's just.
The storage car, or not storage, but whatever she did to it.
Okay.
She's removed that.
Yeah, 'cause I don't have it in the last few months, so if it's been corrected.
That
you're-
happened last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't get her to get it out of there before that. I'd say about a week ago today, probably.
Well, thank you.
So, guess I can go home, huh? They're taking care of the chairs?
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
they're gonna take care of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from the audience? Okay, seeing that there's no other comments, thank you everybody for coming tonight.
Do we need to talk about, do you wanna talk about that 105 East Main?
I figure we'll work our way just on down the list.
Oh, okay, I thought we were
No,
done.
no, we're just done with this part.
Okay, awesome,
So then we'll just move on down the list for the rest of our agenda.
all right.
So anyway, thank you everyone for coming and
Thank you.
participating.
Thanks, Clay.
So we'll move on down to resolutions. Number 1, resolution to approve utility billing credit allowance. It's here in front of you on the table. One customer with a very large credit balance, and I don't feel that we need to keep. Okay. If you'd like to see it, it's right here. The individual has a credit balance of $953.68. We are going to refund her $453, leaving her a $500 credit on her water bill.
And not to go any higher. So
And
500 is our
then
cap.
the resolution that we're going to do tonight is to approve the passage of utility billings accounts not to exceed a credit amount of $500. So,
And then you guys understand the reasoning is
But that's what
if
she-
they move out
Yes.
or anything happens, we have to pay all that back.
If you have a credit, why are you getting a bill?
Because it lets them know what their balance is, even if it's positive. you know,
Okay, all
so that's all it is, saying you have a credit balance of this amount. And what happens is as it builds up, if, you know, something happens, they move out or whatever, the city could be holding a credit balance of $2,500 that we have to pay back, you know, where we keep our budget, you know, like this, so that's the reason. So we just wanted to put a limit on what the credit balance is on it. We do have a lot of,
Or if they go after us for
snowbirds,
interest.
yeah, that will pay, or yeah, that's the other thing, we by law would have to pay interest on that too. So,
Well, I understand it,
yeah.
how did it ever get that high if they pay extra, that, why are they getting a bill?
Oh,
if-
yeah,
If they
it's-
already have a credit?
Yeah, because
they
we
get a
ju-
bill, but they're
yeah.
a statement that.
Yeah,
that
they
you
get
don't
a
know anything.
statement, it's a statement, just says what their balance is, credit or no credit, so we have to give that to them every month. So what we're just trying to do is limit the amount that they can have as a credit balance to $500 so that we can keep it in check and it's not, you know, $1,000, $2,500.
Do you have a motion to approve? Craig, do I have a second? Steve? We'll take roll. Kyle?
Yes.
Lee?
Yeah.
Craig?
Yep.
Steve?
Yep.
Okay, down to motions. Motion to discuss and approve extension for nuisance property at 105 East Main.
So you guys do have that letter in front of you. She contacted she's on the agenda because she contacted the office and she contacted, Doug, too, called Doug, asking for, an extension on time, I believe it was, but she sent an email. I believe you guys have the email and my response back to her, might be at the back of that. So this is the email that she sent. And then I think you guys might have, and this was at the last meeting, you guys did see this. This is what I sent to her and what I requested from her. And, we haven't gotten any reply back at all. And this house is the one that's on Main Street, 105. And you don't have the other properties there because, you know, I mean, the letter's like from Doug, because she specifically requested to be put on the agenda, but she's not here. This property's been an ongoing issue for years. There's a stack of stuff in the
But
file.
She's gotta get it in her name and all that such stuff.
It is in her name. It's in,
She was
it's in.
trying to get him to sign off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, but she can do what she wants with it, cause it is in her name.
Right, that's right.
But you see all the issues there, there's back water bills, there's mowing bills against it, she can't get the water turned on because of that. They have squatters living in it right now, so. This is, you know which one we're talking about, okay. This is 105 East Main. It's on Main Street, Brendage's old house, I don't know, the audience is kinda sitting there, blank looks, and it's 2 houses down from the post office. Yeah, 2 houses down from the post office, a white house there.
Well, I guess my opinion is if she asks for an extension, that she do not show up.
And I give her the, you know, what she had replied back, okay, so she did reply to this, she knows, she got it all, I sent her the letters, because she stated she didn't get the letters from Doug because she had moved, but we got no forwarding addresses for them, you know, so our letters are always returned. And now we do have a forwarding address, so I sent everything in an email to her, that Doug had, and give her that, and then give her to this meeting, and she said she'd be at this meeting, and with a list of things that we needed from her, you know, I think I put in there, cause she stated that she had a contractor, already looked at it, was gonna do this stuff, so I just reiterated that she needed to bring that proof with her to the meeting to show the council that, yes, I had a contractor look at it, and I'm gonna do this, and I got the water and all the nuisances taken care of, and now we haven't heard anything, so. There we sit with that one.
She did report to me, she lives in Pocota maybe.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it was close by, that, everything Tammy said, she kinda explained to me, and I told her, you know, typically, what the council wants is it to be brought into compliance. So if you'll show up with a plan and show some capabilities to do it, they'll probably be thrilled, but you gotta show up.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Mhm.
So, what do you guys want to do?
Give it to the next meeting. See if she shows. See if she shows the meeting, I think that's one good idea. Maybe send her a letter and say you better be at the next meeting for sure. I don't know.
Whatever you guys want, I just want you to say it so everybody can hear it,
Been
whatever
going
you guys
on
wanna
long
do.
enough. I think so too, I agree with that.
Next meeting?
What was your
No.
decision? Tonight?
They have not decided yet.
Do not take possession of the house.
She had every opportunity and every meeting, every effort to have her come to this one.
I did send her, there was a letter sent out to every single person that ever received a nuisance letter, that's why we have a lot of people here today, is like by your guys' request at the last meeting. So every single person that had received one, even if they were in compliance now, even the people, so that they knew we were working on this, you know?
What she had, 6 letters?
Oh my gosh.
A little more, 10?
So do you wanna know for the last 5 or 6 years, when I looked in the file, it's about that thick.
What's the next step?
You gotta ask Doug that one, I'm not that one.
Well, this one's,
Would it fall under what you were talking about,
657A?
the vacant and abandoned properties?
Well, it's not vacant, it
Somebody's
does not have,
squatting
it
But it
didn't have
has
running
not
water.
had utilities in over a year.
all those are important features, but you gotta get over that first hurdle of being vacant. If it's not vacant, then the rest don't matter.
But didn't you say squatters were living there?
That's what she claims.
They got squatters, right? What's that? Well,
They
obviously,
have-
are they illegally
they-
in that property?
They
from
have
getting it?
electricity,
But they do not have running
but they
water.
do not have utilities.
She seems to believe she knows who they are and that she can make them leave. But,
So they're not technically squatters then?
well, I don't think she's given them permission. I think maybe is it her husband? Boyfriend?
Ex-husband.
Ex-husband. Maybe he has, he might be incarcerated.
But his
He
name's
is
still on the house
incarcerated.
also, so
With
that's.
a lot of problems.
That's the
Yeah.
problem.
A lot of problems. Yeah, so if she isn't coming forward with a plan and a course of action, cause I even forewarned her, I said, if you come forward and you wanna do all this, you put 100,000 in the house. And this isn't really the city's problem, but your ex-husband's name's on the title. And, you know, you're just improving his property, does that make sense? I mean, it's great for the city, but you gotta figure out some of these things. So the next step from an enforcement standpoint, and this is the difficult part, I don't know how bad this house is it repairable, should it be torn down, you know, I don't know the situation. But we can file the municipal infraction citation, we attach the notices, we go forward that direction, present evidence, and then what do we ask of the court? Typically, again, we ask for a penalty. In magistrate's court, you can ask for a penalty up to $6,500, because every day that house is a violation can be its own penalty. Different counties, different judges look at things differently. We do a lot of these in Clinton County, every one of them is gonna be a $6,500 penalty. Sometimes the judge will say, the penalty is $6,500. If in the next 30 days, you submit a plan of action and you do these 3 things, and in the next 60 days, you do the next 3 things, the fine will go from $6,500 to $500. But if you don't, then we got that big fine hanging over our head. Now, if you don't do all those things, the city has the right to enter the property and to do the things that you were supposed to do and assess it against you as a personal judgment, as a lien on the property, file a lien with the treasurer, and you can also collect it through the Iowa offset program, if you have a judgment. So if the owners are entitled to tax refunds, you could collect out of that. So if you spent $5,000 cleaning up the property and they're entitled to a tax refund and you filed your paperwork with Iowa offset, you'd get that money.
That's guaranteed money, I mean.
If they're getting a refund, right?
Oh, only if they're.
I mean, only if they're entitled to
Right,
money. If they win big at a casino, I don't know what the number is. If it's over a certain amount, they look for judgments and fines and such. Maybe it's over $1,000. I just don't know. But I've had that happen too, and I had a $3,500 judgment and kind of ruined the guy's night at the casino when he won big. Went to get his check. So
I guess my recommendation is that we deny the extension, and then we put this on the agenda for the next council meeting to proceed with the
municipal
next,
infraction citation.
the next steps. to get this property taken care of. That's my recommendation.
I concur with that.
So, is that a motion, Lee?
Yeah.
Okay. Do I have a second? Kyle? We'll take roll. Kyle?
Yep.
Lee?
Yeah.
Craig?
Yeah.
And Steve? Okay. Motion to discuss and approve permit for a 40-foot shipping container at 201 North Maple. Joe Baker.
Which one was that one?
I believe that's the, is that the one?
Presbyterian Church, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
No.
And he told me he was gonna be here tonight, but the thing was is that I give it to Rod to look at, and Rod doesn't wanna do anything without the council reviewing, cause it's a 40-foot shipping container. So what's your thoughts are?
What's he doing with it? I mean,
For storage? He's gonna
forever or?
He said that, he said that he was gonna put gravel down and put the shipping container on it, and he would possibly even put, railroad ties underneath of it.
That sounds permanent to me.
Is it gonna, is that gonna create an issue as we're getting semi-trailers?
You're the council, I'm just telling you what he.
That's residential though.
That's just giving you permission to let anybody put giant things in their yards.
Yeah.
But that's two different deals. That's residential, correct?
Yes.
Different classification.
They don't have a garage, and he said he wants to get everything put away for the winter, stored in it, so, I didn't know, I tried to look it up for Rod, didn't
I mean, if it's
see.
temporary for 90 days or something till spring, but
Yeah.
that's
I
different.
have,
Did they buy a trailer from you?
Rent 'em one.
Did they for real?
I just wonder if he rented
Sold
one.
6 since this all started.
he said it wasn't a semi-trailer, it was a shipping container. Yeah, cause I asked him because I knew that would come up, but I was like, if it, what it was.
It's basically the box that they can remove.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Just gotta ask yourself, would you like that next to your house?
But the people on the corner just put up like probably a $200-some-thousand brand new home. Are they gonna want to look at that every time they're at their kitchen sink? No.
Yeah, we're talking temporary till he builds the garage.
He didn't say that.
He didn't say
He
that.
did not say that.
That's what I'm saying, that's what we're saying. I mean,
Oh, yeah, it may be, I don't know.
Permit him for 90 days
Can
or.
you
But
put
6
it
months.
on next agenda?
Again,
He's not here. or
He's
she
not
or-
here to
Yeah.
discuss it.
Tell them to paint it white, put a peaked roof on it at your garage.
I'm sure there's language in your
Again,
code,
would you wanna have
this
that
would
in
be
your
what's called an
backyard?
accessory structure.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So we
You
have, I
should.
think,
You really should.
I'd like to
Excuse us.
Guys.
Guys.
Peaked roof so they could drive between them.
at a minimum, you'd treat it as an accessory structure. And look at what your code says about that. There's gonna be maximum sizes, and it sounds like that's probably too big under your maximum size accessory structure. Now, maybe if it was a temporary request, hey, I'm gonna build a garage next year, I need a place to store some stuff in the meantime. That seems to be a different request than what you're hearing. And you can only use so much of your yard space too for an accessory structure, whether, you know, it might can only be in the backyard, maybe not the side yard. You'd have to look at those things. And shipping containers are becoming more of an issue here and there in other towns. Most towns are lining up, like some of the comments in the audience, do you really wanna look at that next year? So it's something to think about, as well. I think with your existing code though, there's probably language in here that if this was gonna be something he's looking at permanently putting there, it might not be permitted.
He's not here to explain himself,
So, fine.
Until we get more information.
We're not gonna do anything until we get more information, so. Okay, moving right along, motion to discuss Larry Bierce deed to property.
He's not here, let me see. Rochelle spoke to him, he came into the office, the day before his or no, a couple days before the auction.
November 22nd, he came in and requested to be on the, agenda tonight to discuss a quit claim deed to the property because he's paid taxes on the property for 40 years.
And I think you're a little bit familiar with this one,
Yeah.
Doug, because I'd sent it because there is so his property along that whole line, even I think part of yours, there's a whole little strip of property that was an old railroad
It's
property.
unclaimed property.
And it's
is what it
unclaimed,
is.
he did not pay taxes on it, cause it's nobody owned, we don't know who the owner is, so.
It's where your street there is called Railroad Street, right? And if you look on Beacon, it says unknown owner. But if you do the history, and I visited with the auditor's office, the underlying title holder, let me get the name wrong, but I know the name airline is in there. So let's say the Northern Airline Railroad Company. And railroads acquire property by easement or by fee simple. This one they acquired by fee simple, meaning it would be like you buying your house. They owned the property, they just have an easement over it. And I don't know if they went bankrupt or disappeared or whatever happened to them, but title never transferred out of their name. So there's nobody to pay taxes, so that's why the county listed unknown owner. But if you look back in the books, working with Vicky, I think at the auditor's office, it's that something airline railroad company that I never heard of. They never actually put tracks down, but they own that property. If you work your way down the street, on each side of the street, there's rectangular parcels all the way down. In the Bierce property, part of the Bierce building, it's either kind of on the rectangle or right next to it, and then behind it. And down, as you go down the block, other people are kind of using it as their own too, but nobody is paying taxes on it. So that piece is not accurate. If you get to the end of the block, who owns the property at the end?
Crop production?
No.
Lloyd.
Yeah,
Kelly, with the county attorney's office.
oh, Dodge. Dodge.
So if you get, they have a
All the way
building,
at the
right?
very end, yeah.
Yeah, their building sits right on that railroad owned property. But what they did is filed some documents to basically claim it. You know, the best way to take ownership is to file a quiet title action where it's a lawsuit and you file notice in the paper saying anybody who has an interest in this, I'm claiming it as mine. If you wanna fight it, show up in court, argue about it, nobody would show up. That's the clearest title. But if you aren't borrowing money, where a bank's involved, you don't really have to worry about having it that perfect. And over time, if you file an affidavit of possession or affidavit of adverse possession, and nobody complains about it after a period of years, it's gonna be yours. So that's what happened at that end of the street. But all these little pieces, you know, where the city street is, usually your city streets are on dedicated right of way, where the city owns it. You don't own where your street is. But, then so what, right? You know, nobody's gonna show up and say, we're gonna take your street, cause nobody wants to maintain it and deal with it. So what Larry had asked for, and I did talk to his wife briefly on the phone about nuisance related matters. It was a short call. But if the city gave a quitclaim deed to that piece of property, you're not given anything, because you don't have any interest to give. But on the other hand, it's kind of like when you vacate some alleyways and you end up giving a deed, the property owners pay the cost that it takes for you to do the process to give the deed. If on the Bierce side of this transaction, if Bierce or the auctioneer or whoever bought the property thinks there's value in getting a deed from the city, it doesn't hurt you to give the deed. You would just want them to cover your costs of doing it. But, I tried to explain to her that, the city doesn't have anything to give you there. But it won't hurt the city to do that either.
And these little triangles you're talking about.
Rectangles?
I'm sorry, you did say rectangles.
Okay.
If it becomes like deeded over, is that, now can the city get taxes from that?
Depends how the auditor looks at it, because if we give them let's say the city gives Larry a quitclaim deed. He takes it to the recorder's office, they'll take it and they'll record it. Goes from their office to the auditor. And then the auditor looks at it a little bit more closely, like, does this really transfer anything? They can either say it does or it doesn't. If they decide it does, then it goes on the tax rolls and they add that piece that you've transferred now to the Bierce property, and in theory increases the taxable value of their land a little bit. If the auditor says the city didn't have anything to transfer, so we aren't gonna, no, it's an ineffective transfer, nothing happened. Probably what would work, and I talked to the auditor about this, I think the answer for all the people with those rectangles is really for them to take it on them, not to get a deed from the city, but to go talk to their lawyer and file an affidavit of possession, or what I call an affidavit of adverse possession, where they would say, I own the adjacent property, me or my predecessors have owned it for 10 or more years, we've taken care of that property, we've treated it as our own, adverse to all others, blah, 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 all the magic language. record that, goes to the auditor's office. The auditor's office told me that they would probably be okay with that, because that's kind of what they did with the Dodge property at the end of the street. So that to me would be a better approach for Larry and others to take than to make the city jump through all the hoops to give a deed to property you don't really have an interest in.
Cause there's nothing we can do with that anyhow.
Now, if the city wanted to, you could file that same kind of affidavit of adverse possession over the street, but I don't know, why you need to. Again, nobody's gonna come forward and try to take it away from you, so.
Yeah.
So there's nothing for us to do.
That'd be my opinion, and I didn't have that conversation with Larry. I know he had a lawyer that called the city.
Yeah, and you had told me this, and I had given the
Yeah.
lawyer, from what I could understand, what you just
Yeah.
told us. What you'd said, that it's not owned by the city, and that we, he wanted us to pay for it and to do the work of getting a deed for him when we don't have any claim to it,
Right.
you know what I mean, and.
Yeah. But I never did hear from his lawyer.
Yeah, I didn't either, he never called me back again,
Okay.
so. But Larry did stop in, so.
And I would guess if somebody bought that at auction,
I think it did sell.
Okay.
Yeah.
so they're gonna wanna do something to deal with that, so maybe the new owner will say, I'll buy it and deal with that myself.
Yeah.
Or take $1,000 off the purchase price and I'll do that.
Yeah, so I don't know, it's already sold, he came in like right before it sold, but demanded, he was supposed to be here tonight.
But I mean, he maybe figured out he don't have to do nothing
No,
for it.
we put him on the agenda because he came in,
Yeah.
Right.
It sold at auction, but he probably hasn't transferred title yet.
Yeah.
Cause the new buyer's probably gonna want an updated abstract to look at the title history, and so this may come up again when they're going through that closing.
So nothing to do. Okay, reports, clerk?
Really don't have much, I don't know anything.
Treasurer? No?
Nope.
Any items for the next agenda, other than the things that we've already talked about? If not, can I have a motion to adjourn? Kyle, me, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.